So, we all talk about wanting deep connection, right? Authentic connection.
Yeah, definitely. It's everywhere.
You see it on social media, self-help books. But then when you actually look at relationships today, well,
It's tough out there.
divorce rates are still, incredibly high. Loneliness is a huge thing, even for people in couples.
Yeah.
It really feels like we're missing something pretty fundamental
Mm,
about how to actually be close.
it's true. And it's strange, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we have more awareness now about mental health, communication,
Mm-hmm.
all of that.
Right, more than ever.
But the struggles persist.
Yeah.
Couples often feel like they're just hitting a wall.
Yeah.
Can't really understand each other, can't get through.
Exactly, that wall. That intimacy gap, that's what we're diving into today. We're
Yeah.
pulling insights from this book, How Can I Get Through to You? And it offers a really sharp take on the core struggles between men and women.
And our mission here in this deep dive, it isn't just about pointing fingers at the problem.
Yeah.
We want to unpack the root causes.
Mm-hmm.
Some are surprising, kind of hidden.
Yeah.
Explore how traditional patterns actually damage both sexes in ways you might not expect.
Mm-hmm.
And, crucially, find a path forward towards, healthier, more passionate connections.
Using the principles from the book, right? Relational recovery.
Exactly. Drawing directly from the source material. And this is really tailored to help you, our listener, cut through the noise, get some real clarity on these complex dynamics.
Okay, let's unpack it then. The author starts with a pretty challenging idea right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
That the core trouble in relationships isn't only about political sexism. The historical power imbalance, oppression of women by men.
Right. That's obviously a huge factor, historically and culturally.
Of course. But the source argues the issue runs deeper, operates more internally.
Exactly. The book introduces this concept called psychological patriarchy.
Psychological patriarchy.
Okay. And you should think of this not just as like a societal structure out there.
Right, external stuff.
Yeah, it's actually a dynamic that lives within all of us,
Yeah.
men and women alike.
Within us.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Well, it's described as this deeply ingrained, often quite painful value system
Okay.
where traits that our culture labels masculine, they get elevated, revered.
Like strength, logic.
Strength, logic, aggression, being anti-dependent, goal-oriented, maybe even a bit insensitive. Those are the examples given.
Okay. And the feminine side.
Those traits get diminished, devalued. So things like weakness, emotion, yielding, dependence, being process-oriented, maybe oversensitive.
Oh, just hearing those lists side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can immediately see how trying to be only one or the other would leave you pretty lopsided, incomplete.
Precisely. And the research mentioned in the book, it completely backs this up.
Right.
The strongest indicator of psychological health is actually having flexible access to the whole range of human traits.
Being able to be strong and sensitive.
Exactly. Logical and emotional, depending on what the situation calls for.
Makes sense.
This capacity was sometimes called androgyny in older research, but the author points to newer stuff that just calls it having access to full human traits.
Okay.
But when we're trapped by this split, this psychological patriarchy thing, it fosters what the book calls a dance of contempt.
Oof. Dance of contempt.
Yeah. Genuine intimacy gets replaced by power struggles, dominance, submission dynamics. Not healthy.
Okay, here's where, for me at least, it gets really interesting and maybe surprising for a lot of listeners.
Yeah.
The book makes this powerful case that this whole patriarchal system, it profoundly damages men too.
Absolutely critical point.
There seems to be, cultural empathy for boys. We can see their vulnerability.
Yeah.
But we struggle to extend that same understanding to grown men dealing with these pressures.
That's spot on. And the source material describes boyhood socialization. It often involves what the author calls normal traumatization.
Normal traumatization, that sounds intense.
It is.
Huh?
It's even argued that violence, in a sense, is boyhood socialization.
Not necessarily physical violence, though.
Not always, no. But the violence of emotional severing. Boys are often pushed away from their mothers too early.
Right.
Pressured to suppress their expressiveness, disconnect from feelings, shed sensitivity.
And this leads to that central kind of gut punch idea from the source.
Mm-hmm.
Disconnection is masculinity. The cultural command, be a man, it just boils down to suck it up, push it down, don't feel.
Precisely. It forces masculinity into this kind of negative identity, defined by what you aren't.
You aren't weak. You don't need help. You don't feel too much.
You're basically not a girl. That's the underlying message.
So Okay, if vulnerability and neediness are pushed onto the feminine side,
which is devalued.
right, devalued or even despised, then men are basically taught to despise those exact parts of themselves.
That's the destructive internal conflict. These vulnerable, needy, so-called feminine parts, they aren't just ignored, they become like internal enemies, actively despised.
Wow.
You see it so clearly in that client Jeff from the book. Remember, he wanted to be like a bone.
Yeah, nothing soft.
Nothing soft.
Yeah.
Or think about will hunting, that raw rage.
Help me. What have I got a sign on my back saying save me?
Yes, that fury.
Mm-hmm.
It's often just fierce protection for a deeply vulnerable core underneath.
Which brings us to this really complex idea in the book. The unacknowledged superimposition of grandiosity on shame.
Yeah, that's a mouthful, but it's key.
Meaning there's this hurt little boy hidden inside the hurting man, a vulnerable self, walled off behind layers of armor. Could be workaholism, drinking, anger.
Right, whatever keeps that vulnerability hidden. And this hidden, disowned feminine part underneath a sort of bluff, masculine exterior. The book calls it the truth about men which dare not be uttered.
And why is it so hidden? Why don't women or children speak it?
Fear. Simple as that. Often.
Yeah.
A very real fear of triggering one of two extremes in the man.
Grandiosity or shame.
Exactly. The puffed up, untouchable state or the collapsed, worthless state. And the source points out, pushed to their limits, these states can be lethal.
How so?
Grandiosity can link to homicide, potentially.
Yeah.
Extreme shame to suicide.
Jeez.
That example of Oliver is so powerful. The young man who attempted suicide.
Yeah.
But even after that, he was still afraid that speaking his truth, his pain, would somehow crush his father. The fear runs that deep.
That is incredibly heavy. Okay, let's shift focus a bit. If that's how patriarchy damages men, how does it manifest and harm women, according to the source?
Well, for girls and women, the main experience of harm described is often through disempowering abuse.
Disempowering abuse. What forms does that take?
It can be many things.
Right.
Interactions that instill shame, make them feel fundamentally worthless, constantly position them as one down. They often learn to kind of submerge their own needs, become the emotional caretakers, the peacekeepers in relationships.
And the book connects this to an interesting dynamic where women might struggle with their own vulnerability and self-care, while also developing this almost overwhelming empathy for the hidden wounded boy they sense inside men, like Skylar and Will hunting again.
Yes, exactly. It's a really complex dance. Women can end up becoming the sort of unwitting keepers of those disowned, vulnerable parts that men have been taught they have to shed.
Which leads to what the source calls the collusion of silence.
Right, where both men and women participate in keeping this uncomfortable truth unspoken. About the split, the hidden pain.
Why do women participate?
Often for very rational, self-protective reasons. They fear speaking out might lead to negative reactions or escalate the man's volatility, that grandiosity or shame we talked about.
So it's the classic don't tell your father pattern, just writ large in relationships.
Exactly. The book uses some really compelling literary examples too, like Macbeth or Agamemnon of sacrificing his daughter Iphigenia.
How do they connect?
They illustrate how the feminine eye, the part that sees truth, feels empathy, acknowledges pain, often has to be shut down or ignored.
Okay.
So that the masculine hand, the drive for action, domination, control, can proceed without interference. It's like disabling the part that sees the cost so the agenda can move forward.
Wow, okay. And the pattern this creates in relationships. The book says it's men combining a boy's vulnerability toward being wounded with a man's entitlement to withdraw or lash out.
Which is incredibly frustrating and difficult to navigate, right? Makes conflict feel unsafe.
Yeah. So women learn, understandably, to withhold information, not out of malice, but for survival sometimes.
It creates this system where nobody feels truly seen or safe or free to be really authentic.
Okay. So if this is the depth of the problem, this whole psychological split and all the damage it causes, why haven't, the usual approaches fixed it? Conventional couples therapy, social movements. Why is the intimacy gap still such a thing?
Yeah, the source material is pretty direct in its critique here. It points out that traditional couples therapy, even though it's widespread, hasn't really moved the needle significantly on divorce rates.
Still around 1 in 2 marriages ending.
Still hovering around there, yeah, for decades.
And didn't that famous Gottman research, the stuff cited in the book, find something surprising about communication skills? Like, just teaching couples active listening didn't really work long term.
Right. That was a big finding. Counterintuitive for a lot of people. Teaching skills like empathic listening didn't actually correlate strongly with long-term happiness or couples staying together.
So what did predict success, according to Gottman?
The reliable predictor was when wives could clearly state their needs,
Okay.
and their husbands were willing to actually alter their behavior in response.
The Yes Dear study, as it got kind of jokingly called.
Exactly. It highlighted this often unidirectional nature of the needed change, which the public found interesting but maybe uncomfortable.
Because it challenged the idea that change always has to be perfectly 50-50.
Precisely. And the book argues that conventional therapy sometimes, with its focus on going slow, building trust very gradually, it can accidentally replicate patriarchal privilege.
How?
Well, men often have more societal power, maybe less of their identity tied up in the relationship itself. So they might bring what the book calls a privilege to flee into the therapy room.
Meaning they can walk away more easily?
Potentially.
Yeah.
And if the therapist goes too slow, trying not to overwhelm the man, kind of like a traditional wife might walk on eggshells, it risks giving him the space and time to just exercise that option to leave when things get uncomfortable.
Oh, wow.
Julie's story in the source is a heartbreaking example of this therapist went slow, husband used the time to get an apartment and a lawyer.
That really puts a different spin on the standard therapy approach. Okay, so if that conventional path often falls short, what's the alternative the source material proposes?
This is where relational recovery comes in. The principles described basically flip the script on that conventional wisdom.
Oh.
Instead of building trust by carefully avoiding difficult issues, you build trust by confronting the difficult truths, directly but skillfully, right from the start.
Whoa, lead with the hard stuff. That sounds intense, maybe scary.
It can feel that way, yeah. But it's grounded in acknowledging something the book calls a fundamental asymmetry that often exists when couples seek help.
Asymmetry, meaning?
Typically, she is the one unhappy with how things are. He is often in therapy because she's unhappy.
Right, that makes sense.
So the initial energy, the push for change, often comes from the woman, but the actual work of changing the dynamic, that often requires the man to connect with his inner world and shift his responses.
So the strategy isn't about forcing the other person. It's more about empowering the person who has the initial energy.
That's a great way to put it. The core strategy is empower the woman to find her voice, speak her truth, set healthy limits, not punitive, but clear limits. That provides the necessary steam to shift the old patterns.
Okay, that's one side. What about the man?
And then help the man connect to his own internal experience, learn to listen without getting defensive, and change his behavior without just retreating or retaliating.
Like Marianne in court in the book. She set limits.
And it wasn't punishment. It was clarity. And that clarity allowed court to actually start listening differently. It's a huge shift.
From trying to control or manipulate the other person?
To taking personal responsibility for your own behavior and integrity within the relationship. The seesaw analogy used is perfect.
Oh, yeah.
If one person is much heavier and the seesaw is unbalanced, you don't ask the lighter person to push down harder. The heavier person needs to stand up to bring balance.
Ah, got it.
Yeah.
Take responsibility for your own weight on the seesaw.
Exactly.
You know, this whole framework, it feels really challenging, obviously, but there's also a real sense of hope in it. The book emphasizes that humans are actually inherently wired for connection.
Yes, that's such a crucial point.
Intimacy isn't some, like, advanced skill we have to learn from scratch. It's our natural state. It points to infant research, resilience studies. We come into the world whole and connected.
That's the bedrock of optimism in this approach, really.
Yeah.
The problem isn't that we lack the capacity for intimacy.
It's that this psychological patriarchy system wounds that innate capacity early on.
Especially for boys, yes. It causes us to lose touch with the very skills we need for real, authentic connection.
So the path forward is about actively relearning those core skills that the system messes up.
Precisely. And the source material provides models for these skills. They're derived from observing healthy human development.
Yeah.
Watching what truly connected relationships actually look like.
Okay, what are some of those skills?
It outlines 5 core self-skills. These are basically capacities you internalize from healthy enough parenting.
Right.
Things like self-esteem, self-awareness, which means really owning your reality, not just what you wish was true, healthy
Right.
boundaries, interdependence, that balance of relying on others and being reliable, and moderation or internal regulation.
And damage to those skills is linked to.
Those dysfunctional states we talked about earlier, shame, grandiosity, addiction, control issues, They often stem from deficits in these core self skills.
Got it. And then there are the relational skills, how you use those self skills with others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The 5 core relational skills. The source material has a chart outlining them. They include things like relational esteem, holding the relationship itself in warm regard,
Okay.
understanding that it naturally cycles through harmony, then disillusionment or disharmony, and then crucially repair.
Repair again. Seems important.
Foundational, then there's speaking relationally, skillfully, effectively.
Hmm.
Healthy boundaries in interaction, not abandoning yourself or your partner, interdependence in the relationship, and moderation, balanced give and take.
No. Okay, that idea of repair really jumps out. You said it's foundational.
It absolutely is. There's fascinating infant observation research, also cited in the book, shows that even the best, most secure infant caregiver bonds, they aren't nonstop bliss.
No.
No, they're a constant dance. Moments of harmony, connection, then inevitable moments of disharmony, a missed cue, a misunderstanding, frustration, followed by repair. The caregiver recognizes the disconnect and reconnects with the baby. That repair is the essential ingredient. It allows the connection to handle challenges and actually deepen over time.
And that's the skill most of us weren't taught.
Tragically, yes, it's a skill most of us never learned explicitly. We might have stumbled upon it, but it wasn't modeled or taught as essential.
Wow. Okay, so how does learning these skills, especially repair, help couples break free from those old, painful patterns you mentioned earlier?
Well, we all learn these transactional patterns, right? These fundamental ways of interacting in our first relationships, our families.
Our family of origin.
Yeah, the book calls it our relational thumbprint. And often, totally unconsciously, we end up choosing partners who somehow allow us to replay those old dramas.
The familiar ones, even if they were painful.
Exactly. The idea is we often fall in love with our mothers and fathers in a relational sense. We recreate the core challenges we grew up with.
Depressing. But the promise here with relational recovery is that you don't have to keep playing out that same script.
Precisely. You can consciously choose to change the ending to that inherited drama.
How?
That example of Dan and Judy in the book shows it really well. They were totally stuck, replaying their parents' patterns, withdrawal on one side, contempt on the other. Awful cycle. But by learning new skills, facing hard truths, they found a way to respond differently, to interrupt the pattern. And that created genuine hope, as the book puts it. It often means allowing yourself to feel those old wounds, but finding a new way to connect within that vulnerability instead of just reacting from it.
And the healing process, it needs both partners involved, right? But maybe in different ways.
It's definitely collaborative. Even if that initial push, the asymmetry is there, the source describes the blatant one.
Usually the man with more obvious behavioral issues, the armor.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
That person works on delivering change, confronting their core issues, learning new responses, and the latent one.
Often the woman maybe working on her role in the silence or boundaries.
Right. Working on her collusion, her internal boundaries, maybe her own inherited patterns. She feels the change the partner is making and responds to it, welcomes it. And that creates these positive feedback loops, charmed circles, the book calls them.
Instead of vicious cycles.
Exactly. The Judith and Damien example is great here. Damien starts taking accountability for his stuff. That allows Judith the safety to confront her own trust issues, her family patterns of collusion. It builds on itself.
And this healing, moving into a new way of relating, it can feel like leaving something behind, maybe even a bit like mourning.
Yes, the source talks about that. It's not always easy. It can feel like leaving behind old loyalties or maybe keeping a parent's spiritual company as you move into a healthier relational world that they themselves couldn't live in or couldn't teach you how to build.
Wow.
Judith's dream about her mother in the burning building is such a powerful image of that. Needing to escape the unhealthy old dynamic, but still feeling that pull, that sadness for what was, what couldn't be.
That's powerful. Okay, so we've covered a lot. The problem, the damage, why old methods often stall, the core ideas of relational recovery, change in patterns. Let's get practical. What does this actually look like? What specific skills are couples learning day to day?
Okay, yeah. A huge focus is on learning to speak and listen adeptly.
Adeptly, more than just communicating.
Much more. It's how you express yourself and how you receive what your partner is saying. Both are crucial skills.
Okay, so speaking adeptly, like those principles mentioned earlier, asking if it's a good time to talk, the contract.
Absolutely vital. Making a contract first and learning to speak from the I, Stating your own feelings, your experience, I feel hurt when, instead of starting with blame, you always.
That's a big shift for many people.
Huge. And the skill of moving from complaint, which is usually about the negative past, right? You never listen, to making a clear, positive request for the future. I need you to put your phone down for 5 minutes when I'm talking to you about something important.
That's concrete, actionable.
Exactly. That Rachel and Steve example in the book really shows how destructive the unskilled, blaming kind of communication is. Just escalates everything.
Okay, so that's speaking. What about listening adeptly? That sounds like more than just not interrupting.
Way more. It requires developing what the book calls relational integrity.
Relational integrity.
Meaning it means learning to know when to back off, when to regulate yourself, because your partner is clearly dysregulated, flooded, not themselves.
Hmm.
The analogy used is blunt but clear. You don't argue with someone who's drunk.
Right, because they can't really hear you or respond reasonably in that state.
Exactly. Now, this doesn't feel fair in the moment, especially if you feel like you're in the right.
Yeah, I can see that being incredibly hard. Like you're always the one having to be the grown-up.
It is incredibly challenging. The source acknowledges it often feels unfair, but it's seen as a necessary practice. It's about maintaining your own integrity and creating the possibility for repair later when the other person is actually capable of showing up differently.
So it requires strong internal boundaries.
Absolutely. Developing internal boundaries is key. The book compares it to physical fitness. It's a practice, takes consistent effort. But Jane's example shows how invigorating it can be, the sense of self and agency you gain.
The book also touched on the gender protester man, like Henry. What was that about?
Yeah. That refers to men who might outwardly seem to conform to traditional, maybe less relationally focused roles, but inwardly they actually deeply value connection and relationship. They're big-hearted.
But they struggle to show it or hide it.
Yeah, they might struggle with traditional forms of responsibility or hide their relational needs behind, say, false promises or patterns of dishonesty because they haven't quite figured out how to integrate their deep capacity for connection into a healthy, authentic masculine identity that works for them and their partner.
So the work for someone like Henry.
It's about defining what a different kind of man looks like for him. How does he act relationally? And then negotiating a new, more authentic marital contract based on that. Henry stopping his pattern of lying, which is described in the source. That's presented as a crucial first step toward relational integrity and rebuilding trust.
Wow, okay. We have really covered a tremendous amount of ground here today.
We really have. We started with that intimacy gap, the crisis in relationships.
Yeah, then unpacked how psychological patriarchy creates these internal splits, wounding both men and women.
Looked at why conventional attempts to fix it often fall short.
And then dove into this alternative path, relational recovery, facing truth, the asymmetry, empowering the woman, connecting the man.
Prioritizing personal responsibility, learning those core self and relational skills.
Especially that crucial skill of repair.
Absolutely. Understanding relationships as that dance. Harmony, disharmony, and repair. And how consciously practicing these skills lets couples actually change the ending to those old, painful, inherited patterns.
It's definitely not a quick fix, is it?
Not at all. It requires real conscious effort. Challenging patterns that are deeply ingrained by culture, by family history.
But the potential payoff, that deeper, more authentic connection, that feels incredibly worthwhile.
And the source material offers that powerful reminder, doesn't it? Intimacy isn't something exotic you have to find or earn.
It's our birthright, our natural state.
Exactly. We're often just taught to move away from it. So reclaiming it, that's the work.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe here's a thought for you, our listener, to carry forward. If healthy connection really involves navigating harmony, disharmony, and that vital step of repair, what's one small step you could take today to practice repair in one of your own important relationships?
Yeah.
Even if it feels uncomfortable, or maybe like you're doing more than your fair share in that moment. What act of showing up differently, speaking more adeptly, or listening with that relational integrity we talked about, what small act could start to shift the dynamic, even just a little?